How safe do you feel at work? And I don't mean your physical safety, although that's very important. The kind of safety I'm interested in is your psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is a concept often applied in the context of the work team environment. And essentially it means that people feel safe speaking up without fear of punishment or humiliation. In a psychologically safe environment, the idea is that people feel safe asking questions. They feel safe bringing new ideas to the table. They feel safe bringing concerns to the table. And they feel safe admitting mistakes. And the concept of psychological safety has been around for about 60 years. In other words, we've known for a long time that fear and anxiety exist in the workplace. And research shows us that fear and anxiety in the workplace is actually a bad thing. Chronic stress, dysfunctional conflict, poor communication, turnover, lack of trust, lack of innovation, lack of productivity. The list goes on. And survey data consistently shows us that the number one reason, or at least one of the number one reasons, people leave their job or plan to leave their job is a toxic company culture. In other words, one without psychological safety. I spent the first decade of my professional career in law enforcement. And one day I was driving around, I was a patrol sergeant, I was driving around, it was towards the end of my shift on a Thursday. And the way our patrol schedules worked is that after your Thursday shift, you didn't return until Monday. I'm driving around and I'm overcome with fear. The reason is I received a text message from my boss that said, "Charles, after you finish briefing Monday, stop by my office." No context whatsoever. And worse than that, it was formal. And it was an order, not a request. And I had to wait 3 days to figure out what was going on. Have you ever received a text message or an email like that from your boss without any context? I'm assuming you have. That unknown, the uncertainty. It's almost like that text message from your significant other, "Hey, we need to talk." We know that's probably not going to go well. And the unknown certainty leaves, or the unknown context leaves a gap, some uncertainty. And our brains don't really like uncertainty. And so in order to help us feel safe, we come up with a narrative, a logical explanation. Because if we can come up with a logical explanation, then at least we feel prepared. And if we feel prepared, then we may feel safer. The problem is the narratives we come up with are usually worst-case scenarios, which only contribute to our anxiety. So not wanting to have my much-needed 3-day weekend ruined by anxiety, I called my boss to see what the meeting was going to be about. No answer. I figure, well, maybe he's on the other line. Maybe he's wrapping up emails. Or, just maybe, he's actively trying to ruin somebody else's 3-day weekend too. So I sent him a text, said, "Hey boss, can you let me know what the meeting's going to be about so I can prepare?" No response. As anxiety starts to build, I say, well, you know what, it's the end of my shift anyway, let me just drive to the station, I'll see him in person, not a big deal. So I drive to the station, go to his office, and as luck would have it, he was gone for the day. By the way, he never replied to that text message. One of my responsibilities at the police department was to train police officers and recruit officers how to recognize when somebody may be in a mental health or emotional crisis, and then how to communicate with them through that crisis. You've probably heard of it as crisis intervention or de-escalation. And in some cases, these are actual life or death situations. And I was teaching from our state curriculum, and over time, I realized that there was a key piece missing. We were doing a really good job of helping officers recognize when other people were in crisis and how to respond to that, but those crisis situations were often volatile and uncertain, meaning we were sending police officers into situations that may also put the officer into crisis. And the curriculum didn't really say much about that. So I began to do some research. Did you know that your brain is hardwired to keep you safe? You've probably heard of the fight or flight response, also known as the threat response or stress response or crisis response. And in short, what happens when your body perceives some sort of a threat, a system in your brain known as the limbic system takes over and begins sending signals throughout your body preparing you to run or fight. Your body releases adrenaline. Your heart begins to beat faster. Blood flows to your larger muscles, and those are just some of the responses. And the good thing is that this process is automatic. It happens very quickly, meaning if you need to run or fight, you're ready. The problem is this process is automatic and it happens very quickly, even if the threat is not putting you into physical danger. In other words, while the rest of your brain is trying to determine whether this threat is real or perceived, your body has already experienced a physiological response, including the release of adrenaline and cortisol, both of which are damaging for your health long term. But the system serves a purpose. Imagine for a moment you're walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden you get that feeling that maybe you're being followed. And you turn your head, and sure enough, there's someone there. And just to make it a little bit more ominous, let's say it's getting dark outside, and they're wearing a hoodie because for whatever reason that just sounds scarier. And you don't know this person, and they're slowly gaining on you. Your threat response activates. Your body releases adrenaline. Your heart begins to beat faster. Blood flows to your larger muscles. This could be a real threat, and your body's preparing you to run or fight. Charles, when you finish briefing, stop by my office. Clearly not a threat to my physical safety, but my brain initially perceived it as a threat. My body released adrenaline. My heart began to beat faster. Blood flowed to my larger muscles. My body was preparing me to run or fight, and it didn't need to be. Now, once the rest of my brain figured out that this threat was perceived and not real, I no longer felt fear, but I felt anxiety. I experienced an emotional response of fear, followed by a weekend of anxiety because of the unknown implications of a text message without context. Now, my fear and anxiety were caused by the unknown, by uncertainty. But in the workplace, a lot of things can cause fear and anxiety. For example, perceived inequity, or a potential loss, or everybody's favorite, change. I mean, everybody loves change, don't they? In law enforcement, there's actually a saying that there's two things cops can't stand, and that's change or when things stay the same. So that fateful Monday morning finally arrives, and I'm exhausted. I haven't really slept great. But I spent a lot of time coming up with plausible explanations, so I'm ready for anything. And I finish briefing, and I go to his office, and you want to know what that meeting was supposed to be about? He had forgotten he even sent me a text message. And apparently he never got my reply. As it turns out, we got to talking about it, and he had been working on a project that Thursday and had to leave early for the day for some reason. And he wanted to get my input, a good thing, he wanted to get my input on the project the next time we were working together, which was Monday. So instead of writing himself a note, which would have saved me plenty of anxiety, he sent me a text message. What we've been talking about today, this idea of the physiological response to a perceived threat, is at the core of a concept I've developed called the crisis-informed leader. If psychological safety is important at the team level, I believe physiological safety is equally important at the individual level. The concept of the crisis-informed leader recognizes that every interaction between a leader and their employee has the chance to be positive, productive, and constructive. However, every interaction between a leader and their employee also has the chance to put the employee into an emotional crisis. It also has the chance to put the leader into a crisis. The crisis-informed leader recognizes that this is a possibility and uses that information to inform the way they approach communication with every individual they lead. My question at the start was, how safe do you feel at work? My question for the leaders in the room is, how safe do you want your employees to feel at work? Thank you.
Charles Heasley.